We live as if there is someone inside pulling the strings, a thinker behind the thoughts, a doer behind the deeds, a seeker behind the search. This is the great illusion, the play of separation, the idea that within this shifting experience there is a fixed point, a me, charting the course, making the decisions, striving to awaken. But what if awakening is not the triumph of that someone, but the quiet evaporation of it? Robert Adams once said, "There is no one who awakens. Awakening is the absence of the one who would awaken." This is not a riddle. It is a direct pointing to a truth that terrifies the ego, but liberates the being. The ego, that psychological echo of memory and desire, believes it is on a journey. It studies, it meditates, it suffers, it struggles, always trying to become better, wiser, enlightened. But what if there is no one to be enlightened? What if all becoming is the dream? What if the one who longs for the light is the shadow? This is not nihilism. It is not despair. It is clarity. For in the absence of the seeker, what remains is what was always here. Not hidden, not attained, but overlooked because the one looking imagined itself as separate from what is. The truth is shockingly simple. There is no awakening because there was no one asleep. There is no finish line because there was no race. Only a story, told by the mind, about a self that never existed. You were never the one on the path. You were the path. You were the sky, watching clouds of identity drift by. The problem isn't that we are trapped. The problem is that we believe we are someone who is trapped. The one who suffers, who clings, who longs for liberation, is itself the illusion. And when that illusion softens, what remains is not a better version of you. What remains is reality. Unfiltered, unbound, free. Not a person who has awakened, but the absence of the person altogether.
The ego is clever. It cloaks itself in spiritual garments, chants mantras with perfect cadence, attends retreats, studies scriptures, all in pursuit of its own permanence. It wants to survive enlightenment. It imagines awakening as a kind of grand arrival, a final victorious chapter where it stands crowned, transformed, eternal. But the truth is far less flattering. There is no arrival, no victory, no one to be crowned. Awakening is not something that happens to the self. It is the evaporation of the self. It is not about becoming a better version of the story. It is about realizing that the story was never real. It is the silence that remains when the narrator stops speaking, the stillness beneath the waves of identity. The mind resists this. It prefers noise to silence. It would rather chase understanding than dissolve into not knowing. But awakening does not occur in the intellect. It is not a theory, not a concept, not even an experience to possess. It is what remains when all that is false is surrendered. What remains when striving collapses and there is no one left to seek. Robert Adams whispered this truth gently. There is no one who awakens. And in that one line, he shattered centuries of misunderstanding. He did not mean that awakening doesn't occur, only that it cannot be possessed. It is not an achievement. It is the falling away of the illusion that there is someone to achieve. So long as there is a sense of I claiming awakening, the dream persists. So long as there is a seeker, the truth remains hidden, not because it is far, but because the seeking itself is a veil. The self, not the personal self, but the timeless, formless being, has never been asleep. It is not touched by the ups and downs of becoming. It is not born, does not die, and has no interest in stories of progress. To glimpse this is not to gain something new, but to lose everything false. It is not the end of your journey. It is the end of you as a journeyer. And what is left when the journey ends? Stillness, spaciousness, a peace that no longer depends on circumstances. Not my peace, just peace. Not my awakening, just presence. Without borders, without center, without need. This is the paradox that the ego cannot grasp. That in its own absence lies the very freedom it has always longed for. That by letting go of its need to exist, it dissolves into the vastness it was always a part of. To awaken is not to rise above the world, but to sink into it so deeply that the boundary between you and it disappears. No separation, no observer, no observed. Only life unfolding, only being.
The end of the search is not a climax. It is not a coronation, not a grand spiritual finale. It is a silence so still that the seeker cannot enter it, because the seeker, in truth, never existed. All your life you have been trying to become whole, to become free, to become someone worthy of love or peace or eternity. But in this movement of becoming, you overlook the simplicity of being. And being does not need to be achieved. It simply is. This is the gentle cruelty of awakening. There is no prize at the end of the path, because the path was imaginary. There is no one to arrive, because the traveler was a thought, a constellation of habits, fears, memories, and hopes, woven together so tightly that it looked like a self. But what you are is not woven. It is the open sky in which all thoughts arise and dissolve. It is the stillness underneath the noise, the clarity untouched by any story. You don't awaken. Awakening is what happens when the idea of you is no longer clinging to its reflection. It is not gained. It is uncovered, not achieved, but remembered wordlessly. And so we stop, not because we've reached a better version of ourselves, but because the dance of chasing dissolves into the stillness that was always present. No more becoming, no more fixing, no more trying to awaken.
just this, unadorned, complete, alive in a way that no ego could survive. What remains is not you, but life, impersonal, radiant, effortless, and somehow more intimate than any self could ever be. You don't possess this freedom. You are it, and you always were.